Emotion has a big influence on what decisions we make. So we like to think that we're very logical, but it's not really true because we tend to become emotionally attached to things or be emotionally influenced by very subtle factors.
So first of all, the interview is going to be related to psychological principles in UX design. And my first question is related to understanding user behavior. So how do you incorporate principles of psychology to understand and analyze user behavior when designing user experience?
So I'll start off by saying that it's the reason psychology is so important in UX design is because it's all about, everything is about user behavior. So anytime someone interacts with your product or even just with the system of your product, psychology is affecting how they make decisions. And I would say decision making is one of the biggest factors because when we're making a product, we want users to make certain decisions. Like we want them to choose our product over a different product, or we want them to choose to subscribe or pay for our product versus a free version, or we want them to continue to use our product or enjoy using our product or write a good review on our product. So from a business standpoint, it's really important because if you understand the psychology of how people behave, then you can tap into giving them an experience that's going to give you outcomes that you want in terms of from like a business standpoint. And then on the other side of things, as a designer, understanding psychology is really important. One, so you can deliver a really good experience based on behavior, but it also helps us understand we're not immune to psychology. So we also have these tendencies. So there's a few behaviors that we're prone to, like cognitive biases and other types of biases. And as designers, we can sometimes fall into those psychology mistakes that we're also trying to design against. So it's really important to have like a well-rounded understanding of psychology in order to deliver what you want to deliver.
And do you have like an example where you understood a behavior of the user and because of that significantly influence you in the design decision?
Yes, several. So let me pick one. I mean, it can be something as small as, so for the product we were building, we obviously had, I was working on a product that you can, if there's content in the product, you can edit and delete that content. And something as simple as where you place actions and how you emphasize or de-emphasize them in the way that they look can affect user behavior. So for example, we switched, or not switched, but we added the ability to delete certain content, and the placement of the button in the usability test actually ended up being pressed more often because the way the buttons were lined up is it was where the cancel button used to be. And so like one psychology principle is that users will tend to like go to what they're familiar with. And so basically they were already familiar with using our product and having a certain button placement in a place. And then when we added a delete function that was kind of close to where the cancel action used to be, then it caused users to unintentionally delete things because they would delete and then we'd have a confirmation modal. So they would just get confused because they were not expecting to see a confirmation modal for deleting content because they thought they were pushing cancel because they were just going by muscle memory into where they normally would want to cancel things based on the way they've used this product and other products similar to it. So the psychology principles can really be very, very small things can have big impacts on the way your users perceive your product. Because if you have a bunch of small things, they tend to add up. So if you constantly have all these small decisions that are like the one I described where users are kind of like, oh, I'm confused, it snowballs. And then overall, they get this impression that every time I use this product, I get very confused or it doesn't do what I expected to do because it's always, everything's in the wrong place. And so.
Yeah, I can imagine. And talking about cognitive load. So did you consider it crucial? Is a crucial aspect in user experience in this in user psychology? What do you think about cognitive load?
Yeah, I think about cognitive load a lot because it's pretty critical to the product we're currently building. The principle of cognitive load is that you want to decrease it, usually. Most of the time, you're trying to decrease cognitive load. And what cognitive load is that when there's too much stimulus or too much choice presented to you at once, you get fatigued, and it increases the amount of time. It's also related to Hicks law, which is basically just the amount of time it takes to make a decision increases logarithmically with the number of choices or the amount of stimulus that you're presenting to someone. And so what you want to do is decrease cognitive load. So a really great example is something like Google search bar. So when you open google.com, the only thing you really see is a search bar. And so Google has done a great job of reducing all cognitive load because there's not several different options on the screen. There's not multiple buttons. There's not ads all over the place. They just keep it very simple. So you're able to,
you know what you need to do and nothing
yes,
else.
yeah, exactly. You open it up and you're like, oh, this is exactly what I expect to do, and this is what I'm going to do. And then you move on to the next page. So if you can, most of the time we want to reduce cognitive load. There's a few times where you're building advanced experiences where you do need a lot of details or information, but you still, even in the cases where you're like maybe you're building an enterprise application for very technical people that has a lot of complex controls, you still want to reduce cognitive load. You just might go about it in a different way because you need to understand that those users have different needs, and so their willingness to accept cognitive load might be slightly higher, but you can still do other things to reduce cognitive load in that situation as well. Not everything needs to be as simple as one search bar in the middle of your screen, but yeah, you kind of apply reducing cognitive load based on what type of user and what their task they are trying to do in the moment. So
And I'm thinking it's not something easy to do because well, me as a user, sometimes I enter to an app or a page and I don't know what to do. Like I don't know what is the button that I need to press, where should I go? I it's something seems to be really simple, but I think it's difficult to accomplish.
oh, it's very difficult, especially since, you're not, like you're saying, you open an app and you don't know what to do. Well, it depends on who's opening the app. Is it someone who's never used it before? This is their first day opening the app, trying to use it? Is it someone who's been using it for months and they have a very specific task they're trying to do? Like, completely dependent on who's trying to use it. What's the one thing they want to do? Well, it really depends on who's doing it. So now you have to consider all these different scenarios where how do you reduce the cognitive load based on these different people? So you might do that through having specialized landing pages for different user types so that if they jump in, if you're a new user, you might want to see like an onboarding experience that kind of puts blinders on the complicated stuff that you're not really dealing with and guides you through to getting like a simple job done. Or if it's someone who's more advanced, you might want to jump them into a different experience that's more like an experience based on them, maybe a dashboard that shows them pieces of the application that they are more frequently using or more likely to use like on a regular basis. So you're absolutely right. It's very hard to make these decisions on the design and reduce the cognitive load because the variety of ways you can do that and the based on different scenarios is really, really wide, right?
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't know how you guys do it. So, moving on to a different subject, talking about emotional designs. Emotional design plays a role in user engagement. So, how do you leverage psychological principles to evoke specific emotions or create a positive user experience?
Okay. So being able to create a emotional connection with your user is really important because emotion has a big influence on what decisions we make. So we like to think that we're very logical, but it's not really true because we tend to become emotionally attached to things or be emotionally influenced by very subtle factors. So even things as simple as the colors or the appearance, or psychologically, we tend to put a lot of emphasis on the first impression and the last impression we have on something. So for example, like you tend to remember your first impression of a relationship and the very last memories of it, and those tend to have a very big influence on how you perceive the entire whole. So being able to apply those principles to the design experience, you definitely want to, we all know it's very important to make a very good first impression. And to design for engagement, you really, that's why there's so much emphasis on onboarding and really making sure that first touch point you have with users is exceptional, because if it is, you're going to have like a high likelihood of engagement and a high likelihood of retention. And then the same thing with, I mean, ending touch points, we don't really want to think about that because we want to think that they're going to continue using the product, but you can also think about it in terms of like the life cycle of what they might be doing. Like they might be entering different phases of using your product, and making sure that each of those phases feels good at those touch points can also have a big impact on engagement. So other psychological principles that you can use for engagement are just having a clean and a visual aesthetic that matches the user's expectations or the user's impressions of what your product and brand are all about. So when that lines up with what they want or with what they expect, then that also is going to leave a really good emotional attachment to them, to that product.
And do you have an example when you like intentionally design something for making an emotional impact?
Yeah, so I worked briefly with a product that was about, it was kind of like the brand was very like fun and creative because it was about like people who cook at home are like chefs, but they're individual chefs, so they want to sell their own recipes to different businesses. And so the brand overall for that experience that we were designing onboarding for was very focused on like a very creative style and a very playful color palette, and it was kind of like a funky design too. It wasn't very traditional material design or traditional bare bones, very like, it was very colorful and fun. So I think that had a big impact on the clients. What they wanted to leave the impression with their user base was that it was for individuals who were trying to make these connections within the culinary industry. And so I thought that was kind of unique, because I think sometimes we go for enterprise looks and enterprise dashboards that everyone's used to. And I think it was a good move to make a creative style for that particular instance based on the types of users that they were trying to cater to.
Really interesting. And now moving on to now I have, when you were talking about user feedback and everything, I just like had a question about it. So how do you add like psychological factors, or how do you integrate this in your feedback or in your user feedback or in the design process? There are specific, I don't know, specific questions, a specific something that you evaluate regarding psychological factors when you're having a user feedback?
Do you mean how do you apply psychology? Like when you get user feedback, how
Exactly.
do you consider psychology in what they say?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I think that this is interesting because I feel like it's hard to do because there's so many different, it's not like there's a few there's some big ones, but there's so many different influences and psychological principles to consider and to think about and make sure you're balancing them. So when you get feedback, it can be tricky, but I think it is helpful maybe to, and this is something I should probably do more, is like when you're evaluating user feedback or analyzing it and organizing it, maybe like have a list of those psychological principles, a good one is like lawsofux.com, but there's other sites that explain different psychological principles. Having that to the side maybe and referencing it before you make judgment calls on what the feedback is. So, for example, considering what that user's bias might be in that moment. So they might say, I hate this application, or I don't like this, it never works. And so if they say something that's really strong, it might be good to like look at your psychological principles and consider, well, what's their bias and where are they what influences are contributing to this, because the user might say, this is the thing that I want fixed, or this is the thing that I don't like, or this is the thing I do like. But it might be not just that one thing they're mentioning. There might be a multitude of influences that are factoring into what they are saying. So if you consider the whole and think about what could possibly be influencing them, you might have a better shot at fixing what they actually like, fixing the real need instead of just fixing exactly what the feedback is, or directly responding only to the feedback.
So interesting,
makes
because
sense.
I think it's not easy. Like,
No.
I don't know. We're humans. We are going to make a judgment call, So
Yeah. It's tricky too, because you might get opposite feedback. I mean, that's happens I think every session I have for the project I work on now for government sessions, we have a wide user, like the type of users are very like diverse, and we will get feedback. We'll have a session, it will go really great. We'll learn a lot, and we'll hear this piece of feedback. We're like, oh, that's a really good point. Maybe we should look into fixing that or considering it. And then the next session, the user will say the exact opposite of like basically something that cancels out what the first user said. And so then we have to go, okay, well,
and
so then
what did you do at that point? You come in the middle, or what did you do?
well, we try to think about, like, first of all, we try to meet with more people, especially if it's like down the middle. You definitely want to, you don't want to, we want to have at least like a good sample size of people to talk to so that you can kind of get the trend. Because if you talk to 10 people and only one person has this like alternative opinion and everyone else has pretty much the same opinion, then maybe that one user is an outlier, which could be the case. But if it's very split feedback, maybe it's the circumstances that bring them to that point, and that's why they have an opposite opinion. So either what they're familiar with is different, or what they're approaching the task maybe slightly differently. So it's possible that maybe you can build two different experiences that like accommodate both of those needs, maybe in the way that they're approaching it. That's one choice. So for example, you could offer two different views or two different ways to do the same task, so that way it matches both users' mental model. Or it could be that maybe neither of those changes are the right change. So maybe there's something wrong with the way that you built it. Not wrong, but the way you built it is causing confusion, and there's not enough clarity on how it should be used, and that's why you're getting this like diverging opinion on what should be changed. So one thing I always try to do when I'm listening to user feedback and thinking about it is I try not to always take it like at point blank value, because a lot of times you'll get like really great suggestions from users, but then they're very biased. User sessions tend to be a little bit biased because you're asking them questions about a specific point in the journey. And even if you try to ask unbiased questions with your users during testing, there's always going to be a little bit, because they're being watched, which means that they're going to behave slightly differently, and they're kind of being primed a little bit because you're talking about a specific part of the product. So you have to just I try to take everything with a grain of salt. So I try to dig a little bit deeper than just what they said or what they suggested.
Oh, how difficult. It's and I realize it's too difficult to find that. And I don't know. I found it really interesting.
Yeah, it's like what they say, I forgot the original exact way that it's said, but it's the expression, if people always knew what they want, if people knew what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. I don't know, I kind of butchered it, but
Yeah,
but
but
essentially
we
just
don't know what we want.
no one would have said, well, I really want a car, or I really want this vehicle that runs on gas that can go faster than my horse. Like, they would just say, oh, I wish my horse were faster. So you can't really users don't always know what they want, because they don't have the intuition to be able to like think outside of what their current like scope of what they're doing is. Sometimes they do. Sometimes users have really great suggestions, but you
But I
always have
think
to
that
think
the
about the
normal
broader.
is we don't know. And I think that the difference is we don't know what we need. Maybe
Exactly.
maybe we think we do because that is what we want, but it's not what we need. So sometimes it's really difficult, I think, for a user to give a feedback that is not what they want, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. It is very true. And sometimes what you want is because what you're currently trying to do, this happens a lot in the product I work on now, but like when users are currently trying to achieve a specific task, like that's all they think about. And so they're like, I wish everything was right here so I could do it faster. But that's only like a small percentage of the time that they're trying to actually do that task. So it's not really they really don't want it like in their
Yeah.
face all the time because they're not actually doing it that often. It's just that one, it's when they're already thinking about it, then it feels like, oh, I wish this was always here. So
Oh,
yeah.
how interesting. That was my last question. So it's so interesting. Thank you so much, Sydney, for this conversation.